Okay, picture this for a second. You've got the Great Pyramid of Giza, right? This just impossible monument rising out of the sand in Egypt, and it's perfectly aligned with the cardinal points.
An icon of ancient engineering.
Exactly. Now, jump across, oceans and thousands of years. You're on Easter Island, those huge stone heads, the Moai, just staring out across the Pacific.
Enigmatic, absolutely.
And then zip back across again to Mexico, ancient Teotihuacan. Its pyramids are laid out mirroring the stars above.
Another incredible light. Yeah.
So here's the thing. These places, they're separated by unbelievable distances, by, countless generations, totally different cultures, languages, everything. But they share this astounding secret.
Go on.
What if I told you that these sites, and actually a whole bunch of others, aren't just individually lined up with stars or north-south, but they're actually connected, part of an invisible, global geometric pattern?
That's a pretty bold claim. Coincidence or something more?
Right. Is it just a crazy, statistically impossible series of coincidences? Or does it maybe point to something, profound, a long-lost secret about our own past?
It certainly challenges our standard view of history.
Welcome, everyone, to the Deep Dive. This is where we tackle the big questions, the really baffling mysteries, and we try to unpack them for you. We dig into the sources, pull out the most important bits, the key nuggets of knowledge.
Giving you the essence without you having to read stacks of research yourself.
Exactly. And our mission today, it's to unravel this really haunting enigma. Why do these huge ancient structures all over the planet show such precise alignments? Alignments that link them together and also link them to the heavens.
And what does that actually mean for how we understand ancient people, their capabilities, and maybe even the whole story of human history?
Yeah, this deep dive is basically your shortcut to getting up to speed on a mystery that, honestly, it challenges almost everything we thought we knew. How could these civilizations who supposedly had zero contact, building with what we think of as, basic tools?
Stone and copper, essentially.
How could they build monuments with these nearly identical, incredibly precise alignments that stretch across entire continents in thousands of years? So yeah, prepare to have your perception stretched a bit, because we are diving deep into the unexplained.
And that premise you've just laid out, it really does hit at the core of our conventional understanding, doesn't it? For generations, archaeology, it's mostly given us this picture of independent development. Different cultures popping up, doing their own thing, maybe collapsing, all in isolation.
Right, like little islands of civilization.
Exactly. Their innovations, their ideas supposedly just grew out of local needs, local conditions. But then you have this evidence, these global alignments you mentioned. It's like a discordant note in that symphony. It's this persistent pattern that suggests something else.
Like a shared something.
A shared knowledge, perhaps? Or a common blueprint. Maybe even some kind of influence that wasn't just geographical, but also spanned huge amounts of time. It forces us, really, to ask some tough questions about how clever ancient people actually were and how connected the world might have been way back then.
And that shared knowledge, that blueprint, that's what some people call, pretty dramatically, I think, the pattern they can't explain.
It's a good name for it.
Yeah, because it's this thing that, a lot of mainstream history kind of glosses over or just says, oh, it's chance. But the sources we're looking at, they point to something way more deliberate, something almost, impossibly precise.
So what are we talking about specifically, this pattern?
We're talking about this invisible single line, a geodesic path that wraps around the entire planet. It's sometimes called the Great Circle, or maybe more evocatively, the ancient alignment line.
And just to clarify, when we say geodesic path on a sphere like Earth, we mean the shortest possible line between 2 points on that curved surface, like stretching a string really tight between 2 spots on a globe. That's your geodesic.
Got it. So it's the straightest line possible on a round planet?
Precisely. And what's completely mind-boggling is that so many major ancient sites seem to fall incredibly close to one single line like that, circling the whole globe. And this isn't just some theory, some line drawn on a map afterwards. It connects real, famous, ancient, often sacred places.
The list of sites is it's stunning. It's like a who's who of ancient mysteries.
So let's name some names. Where does this line go?
Well, it starts, maybe predictably, with the Great Pyramid of Giza in Egypt. The icon. Can't miss it.
Okay, the anchor point.
Then trace this invisible line eastward. You hit Petra in Jordan, that incredible city carved straight out of rock cliffs.
Breathtaking place.
Keep going east. You land in Persepolis in Iran. the grand capital of that ancient Persian Empire, with the massive staircases and columns.
A symbol of immense power in its day. And the pattern just keeps going, relentlessly.
Right.
From Persia, the line carries on and touches Mohenjo-Daro over in Pakistan.
Right, the Indus Valley civilization, super advanced for its time.
Absolutely. One of their largest cities, amazing urban planning, drainage systems, things that wouldn't be seen again for ages. Then, further southeast, we hit Angkor Wat in Cambodia.
Oh yeah, the temple complex. Huge, intricate.
A masterpiece of Khmer architecture, yeah. Famous for its carvings and, significantly, its own precise astronomical alignments.
But it doesn't stop there, does it? That's the crazy part.
Not even close.
The line then takes this unbelievable leap, jumps straight across the Pacific Ocean, connects the old world to the new world, and it lands directly on the Nazca lines in Peru.
Those giant drawings in the desert,
Yeah.
the ones you can only really see from the air.
Those exact ones. Still don't really know what they were for. And then the line keeps going all the way to, about as remote as you can get, Easter Island in Chile.
With the Moai statues.
Yep, home of the giant Moai staring out to sea. So think about this list. Giza, Petra, Persepolis, Mohenjo-Daro, Angkor Wat, Nazca, Easter Island.
Thousands upon thousands of miles apart. Different continents, different oceans, different cultures, different time periods.
And yet they line up, not just sort of close, but according to the sources, within a fraction of a degree of this one single invisible global line.
With statistical improbability of that happening by chance, it's just astronomical. You have to really let that sink in.
Yeah, seriously.
Think about the scale. Structures oceans apart, built over millennia by cultures we're told had no contact. And they all fit onto one single global path. It implies either a level of global coordination or at the very least a shared understanding of the planet's geometry that our current history books just don't allow for. They can't explain it within that framework.
It's the consistency too, right?
Yeah.
Not just roughly lined up.
Exactly. It's not a rough fit. It's consistently, almost perfectly aligned. It pushes way past coincidence. And that's a key insight here. The sheer precision of this great circle, it demands an explanation. We have to consider something more than random building. Either they all knew something globally or, something else was influencing them.
And then, as if that wasn't enough to chew on, the plot thickens. Because it's not just this global alignment.
Oh, there's more.
Oh, yeah. There's this deeply recurring theme. Precise astronomical alignment for almost every single one of these sites.
So lining up with the stars as well.
And not just, look, the sun rises over there. We're talking specific, significant celestial events. The sources mention alignments with solstices and equinoxes, the turning points of the sun's journey through the year.
Which are important markers for agriculture, for calendars, yes.
Sure, but it goes deeper. Many sites are explicitly linked to specific constellations. The famous one is Orion, the hunter in the sky. His belt is a really distinct pattern. Several major sites seem to mimic Orion on the ground.
Like Giza and Teotihuacan, as you mentioned earlier.
Exactly. And even crazier, in some cases, researchers claim alignments with the galactic center, the actual rotational hub of our entire Milky Way galaxy.
Now, pinpointing the galactic center, that's not easy, especially not without modern instruments. It's not a bright point of light.
Right. It implies this really profound shared understanding of how the cosmos works across all these different cultures. It suggests these massive buildings had a purpose beyond just, calendars or basic worship.
It points towards something more sophisticated, mapping cosmic cycles, predicting events, maybe encoding some kind of deep spiritual knowledge. The level of detail suggests a highly advanced knowledge base was involved.
Which brings us right back to the big questions. Who could possibly calculate this stuff and then build these massive structures with such accuracy across whole continents and over vast stretches of time? And maybe even more critical, why? What was the point of this huge global design?
It really compels us to think about a common source of knowledge, doesn't it? Or maybe some kind of widespread shared goal that just doesn't fit into our standard historical narrative.
That's the absolute crux of it. Because it leads directly to the next massive question. What is mainstream science, particularly, conventional archaeology, missing here?
Well, the standard narrative, as we've touched on, it generally holds that these were independent achievements, built by separate cultures, in isolation, developing their own unique ways of doing things.
Right. Egypt did its thing, the Maya did theirs, the Indus Valley did theirs. No connection.
That's the general picture painted. But then you bump up against the actual physical evidence, the hard facts on the ground, and it starts to poke holes in that neat story. It almost dares you to look closer.
And there are concrete examples, right? Things we can point to that seem to totally defy that independent development idea.
Absolutely. Let's go back to the Great Pyramid of Giza. It's not just big, it's ridiculously precise. The sources hammer this home. It's aligned almost perfectly with true north, the error margin. Less than 0.05 degrees.
0.05.
Oop.
Like, what is that? It's minuscule.
It's less than 1/20th of a single degree. Now try achieving that kind of accuracy without GPS, without satellites, without lasers, using only the tools we think they had back then. Copper chisels, maybe some plumb bobs, basic leveling tools.
Oh, how do you line something that massive, covering acres, hundreds of feet tall, that accurately across a desert? It just seems impossible.
It implies a mastery of geodesy measuring the Earth and astronomy. That is, frankly, it's unsettling if you stick strictly to the conventional timeline of technological development.
Totally perplexing. And it's not just Giza, is it? You mentioned Teotihuacan in Mexico earlier.
Yes, another prime example. That whole sprawling city, especially its main pyramids, the Pyramid of the Sun, the Pyramid of the Moon. The layout is said to mirror the Orion constellation on the ground.
Just like Giza is claimed to mirror Orion's belt.
Exactly. It's not just a vague resemblance. Researchers draw a direct, almost uncanny parallel. And this suggests either a shared celestial blueprint, some common understanding of the cosmos, or, well, something else connecting these cultures across the Atlantic, cultures that supposedly never met. It's a pattern that just keeps repeating.
It connects the dots, whether we want it to or not. And then there's Angkor Wat.
Angkor Wat in Cambodia, yes. Another architectural marvel. It's aligned with the constellation Draco, the dragon. But there's an even more, let's say, provocative detail.
What's that?
Some analysis suggests its structures mirror the night sky, not as it looked when it was built around the 12th century AD, but as it appeared way back in 10,500 BC.
10,500 BC, that's ages before Angkor Wat was built, like 8,000 years before.
Precisely. Now, to understand why that date is significant, you need to know about precession. It's the slow wobble of Earth's axis, like a spinning top slowing down. It gradually changes the apparent position of the stars over very long periods, thousands of years.
Okay, so the stars aren't fixed in the same spot forever.
Exactly. So for ancient builders to somehow encode the sky map from 10,500 BC, a time conventionally thought of as the Stone Age, long before complex civilization supposedly arose into a structure built thousands of years later, that implies an astronomical observation record, a knowledge tradition stretching back millennia, far longer than we usually credit.
Or they got that knowledge from somewhere else, from an even older source.
That's certainly one interpretation. It suggests either an incredibly long-lived tradition of advanced knowledge passed down secretly, or perhaps inheriting it from a civilization far more ancient than mainstream history currently recognizes.
Okay, so we've got these undeniable examples. Extreme precision at Giza, shared star patterns at Teotihuacan and Giza, ancient sky maps at Angkor Wat across totally separate cultures, and then comes the kicker. Modern engineers, today, with all our fancy GPS, satellite data, laser theodolites, everything, they freely admit that replicating this level of precision, especially on such a monumental scale, aligning these huge, complex structures over vast distances, it would still be really challenging for them.
Not impossible, perhaps, but a massive undertaking requiring serious tech and planning.
Right. So if we would find it hard today, with all our tech, how on earth did they do it thousands of years ago, supposedly with just stone tools, maybe some rope, and a good eye for the stars? The standard story just, it doesn't add up. It fails to explain this huge gap.
And the source material we looked at, it doesn't shy away from that gap. It explicitly and, provocatively asks the question, or rather, makes the suggestion, unless they had help.
Dun dun dun.
Well, yeah.
Yeah.
This is really where the standard archaeological story hits a major roadblock. The usual approach is often to downplay this sophistication, or maybe attribute it to simpler methods we haven't figured out, or just, extraordinary luck repeated over and over again.
Which seems statistically unlikely.
Extremely unlikely. So when you connect all these dots, the consistent, almost impossible precision seen worldwide, it strongly suggests there's a big piece missing from our historical puzzle. It forces us to rethink our basic assumptions about what ancient people were capable of. What if their tech, or their knowledge, or maybe even outside influences were far beyond what we imagine?
That's the core question these facts throw in our face, isn't it? Maybe the problem isn't the evidence. Maybe it's the framework we're trying to fit it into.
That's a very insightful way to put it. The paradigm might be the limitation.
And here's where it gets really interesting. Because if modern science struggles to explain how they did it within our current understanding of ancient capabilities, well, maybe we need to broaden our perspective. Think outside the box about what was actually possible way back then.
Which naturally leads into some more, let's say, unconventional hypotheses.
Fascinating ones, though. Some researchers are suggesting that these ancient civilizations didn't just invent all this complex knowledge independently, in these little isolated pockets of genius.
What's the alternative they propose?
That they inherited it, that the knowledge came from somewhere else, from a much older, incredibly advanced, but ultimately lost civilization.
The idea of a precursor civilization, a source culture.
Exactly. This theory suggests this amazing continuity of knowledge, like an intellectual inheritance passed down through the ages, maybe surviving through small groups after some big collapse, groups who held on to the knowledge of an earlier, highly developed global culture.
And of course, this immediately brings to mind the legends, doesn't it? Atlantis.
Right. Plato's Atlantis, that powerful, advanced island civilization that supposedly vanished.
Yeah.
Or you hear about Lemuria, that hypothetical lost continent in the Pacific or Indian Ocean.
Said to be another cradle of early humanity.
Yeah. But proponents of this idea often talk about maybe other unnamed global cultures that existed long before recorded history. Civilizations that might have had the super advanced astronomy, geology, engineering skills needed to even conceive of, let alone build, this kind of meticulous planet-wide network of sites.
The existence of a civilization like that, if proven, would certainly solve a lot of these historical puzzles quite elegantly, wouldn't it?
It really would. And the really compelling idea here is that these alignments, they weren't just accidents. They weren't random. They were part of a bigger plan, a huge global blueprint.
A blueprint for the whole planet.
Kind of. Imagine this vast planetary grid, like an unseen network, maybe of energy, maybe of knowledge, connecting specific, strategically chosen points all over the Earth.
That is a profound thought.
Isn't it?
Yeah.
That maybe the planet itself was mapped out, maybe even sort of engineered by this ancient precursor civilization. And these sites we marvel at today, Giza, Stonehenge, Machu Picchu, all of them, they aren't just monuments, they're markers. Nodal points on this incredibly ancient forgotten map. It completely changes how you see them.
They become components in a much larger system.
Exactly, not just standalone wonders.
And this idea of a planetary grid or some kind of underlying energy network that often gets linked to another fascinating concept, ley lines.
Ah, yes, ley lines. Tell us about those.
Well, the sources dive into this belief, which seems to have been pretty common among many ancient cultures all over the world, actually. It's the idea that there's this vital, unseen energy flowing through the Earth, like a life force, or maybe telluric currents, running like veins within the planet's crest.
Okay, like Earth energy pathways.
Sort of, yeah. And the belief was that certain spots on the Earth's surface acted as, like, concentration points, nodal points, where this energy was much stronger, more potent, almost like natural power hubs scattered across the globe.
And the theory is these ancient sites were built right on top of these power spots.
That's the consistent belief, yes. That temples, pyramids, stone circles, other sacred sites, they weren't just placed randomly for, say, good views or defensive positions. They were intentionally built precisely where this earth energy was thought to be strongest.
Which really makes you wonder, okay, if this energy is real, and if they could somehow detect it or even use it, what was it for?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
Was it for power? Like actually generating energy for some kind of lost ancient technology we can't even imagine?
That's one possibility.
Or maybe healing, creating places with special restorative or spiritual vibes, drawing on the Earth's own energy.
Another common idea associated with sacred sites.
Or, and this is maybe the wildest, was it for communication? Like a massive planetary network, transferring information, maybe even consciousness or power itself across huge distances using these energy lines. The possibilities are just, well, they're mind-bending.
They really are. And the implications are huge because it shifts our whole understanding of why these places were built. From just ritual or burial sites to potentially highly advanced functional installations.
And there's more connecting these sites than just the alignments and these energy line theories, right?
That's right. It's not just about where they are, geographically or astronomically. Our sources also point out that many of these megalithic structures, these giant stone constructions found all over the world, they share surprisingly similar architectural styles and even construction techniques.
Even though they were supposedly built by totally separate cultures.
Exactly. Which again suggests some kind of shared knowledge base, something beyond mere coincidence. And then there's an even more speculative but really intriguing idea.
Lay it on us.
The idea that these sites might share detectable vibrational frequencies.
Ooh, okay. That sounds a bit new agey.
It can sound that way,
Yeah.
but the hypothesis isn't necessarily mystical. It's more about whether ancient builders might have understood acoustics, or the resonant properties of certain types of stone, or the shapes of the structures themselves. Maybe they deliberately designed them to tune in to specific natural frequencies, perhaps the Earth's own resonance, or cosmic frequencies.
For what purpose, though? Still healing or something else?
Maybe healing, maybe enhancing consciousness, maybe even manipulating subtle energies for purposes we just don't understand yet. But the point is, this consistency in architecture, potentially in these energetic signatures, it really strengthens the argument that we're looking at some kind of shared, overarching design philosophy, not just a bunch of isolated, independent projects.
So, putting it all together, what does this all mean? Are we genuinely talking about a forgotten global network, maybe literally powered by the Earth? A system so advanced it came before recorded history.
It certainly points in that direction, or at least raises those possibilities very strongly.
Which brings us squarely into the most controversial territory of this whole discussion. We're talking about theories now that really push back hard against the standard historical story, challenging things that are pretty deeply ingrained.
Yes, this is definitely where the conversation often shifts from mainstream archaeology into areas that some would consider more speculative, maybe even fringe.
But we have to go there, right?
Absolutely. It's crucial to explore these theories because they are specifically attempting to explain these profound anomalies we've been talking about, the things that conventional explanations struggle with or simply can't account for. When the standard model doesn't fit the facts, you have to be willing to consider alternative hypotheses, no matter how unconventional they might seem at first glance. They emerge to fill that intellectual vacuum.
Okay, so let's dive into the big ones. Probably the most famous, the one that gets the most attention, is the idea of, well, extraterrestrial help.
The ancient astronaut theory, essentially.
Right. This hypothesis suggests that ancient humans didn't figure all this out on their own. They were guided by extraterrestrials, that beings from other worlds came here and basically seeded knowledge, architecture, technology among early human civilizations.
The core argument behind this is often based on the perceived impossibility of the achievements.
Exactly. It says, look, the precision, the engineering, the shared global patterns, humans back then, with the tools and knowledge we think they had, just couldn't have done it. It's too advanced, too complex, too globally consistent.
So therefore, there must have been an external, non-human intelligence involved.
Yeah.
A guiding hand from off-planet.
Yeah, it's presented as the most logical explanation for things that otherwise seem completely impossible within our current understanding of human history.
And it's a theory that, while obviously highly controversial and lacking definitive proof for many, directly tries to tackle that huge technological and astronomical leap that seems necessary to explain the evidence. If ancient humans couldn't do it alone, then an external, more advanced entity. Well, it provides that missing link. It answers the how do they do it question by basically saying they didn't do it alone. It's radical, for sure, but it's born out of the sheer difficulty of explaining the data otherwise.
Okay, so that's one major controversial theory. What's another big one?
Another fascinating theory, which ties back more closely to those ley lines and Earth energy ideas we discussed, is that these ancient structures weren't just on power spots. They were part of an ancient energy grid.
An actual grid, like a power grid.
Potentially, yes. Specifically designed, according to this theory, to actively harness Earth's natural electromagnetic fields, so it's moving beyond just detecting or being located on energy lines to actively using them, almost like a planetary technology.
Wow. Turning the Earth itself into a power source or maybe a communication network?
That's the implication. And what's really mind-blowing about this theory is the completely unexpected connection it has to someone from much, much more recent history.
Who's that?
Nikola Tesla.
Tesla, the inventor. Electricity genius. How does he fit in?
Well, Tesla, the brilliant electrical engineer, almost a century ago, he made these incredible claims. He believed the Earth itself could transmit wireless energy, that the planet could act like a giant conductor, providing free, limitless power to everyone.
Yeah, I've heard about his wireless power ideas, Wardenclyffe Tower and all that.
Exactly. But here's the really intriguing part, the detail that connects directly back to our ancient sites. His famous experimental tower out in Colorado Springs, where he did a lot of his groundbreaking wireless energy tests.
Yeah.
He didn't just build it anywhere. He specifically chose a location he called a natural power point, a place where he believed the Earth's electrical energy was naturally concentrated. And guess what?
Don't tell me.
Later analysis apparently showed that this specific spot Tesla chose was, as the sources put it, eerily close to ancient alignments of other known megalithic structures.
Get out! Seriously, Tesla built his tower on one of these potential ancient grid points.
That's the connection being made. And it's profoundly significant. It suggests that maybe modern science, through a visionary like Tesla, was inadvertently rediscovering principles that the ancients already understood and perhaps even utilized.
So the ancients might have already known how to tap into these planetary energy fields, and Tesla was just stumbling back onto that lost knowledge.
If that theory holds water, yes. It would provide a powerful, though obviously revolutionary explanation for how they could achieve things that seem impossible to us, building globally connected structures, maybe even powering lost technologies using the Earth's own energy. It forces us to consider that maybe scientific progress isn't always a straight line forward. Sometimes maybe we're just catching up to the past.
That really makes you wonder, doesn't it? Are we just finding fragments of this incredible ancient understanding of global energy systems, echoing what Tesla was trying to tell us 100 years ago? Whether you lean towards forgotten blueprints from a lost civilization, or maybe help from off-world, or this deep knowledge of Earth's energies, the implications are just staggering.
Really are.
Which brings us, I think, to the biggest, most fundamental question underlying all of this. What if we've been looking at history all wrong? What if the whole narrative we've accepted, the story we tell ourselves about the past, is incomplete, or maybe even just fundamentally flawed?
And what really stands out looking at all these theories, even the really out there ones, is that they're all trying to do the same thing. They're trying to bridge these huge, undeniable gaps left by the standard explanations. Gaps in explaining the precision, the global reach, the recurring themes in these ancient sites.
They're trying to make sense of the data that doesn't fit.
Exactly. And they compel us, really, to critically re-examine our assumptions about the past. The key insight here, I think, is that when the evidence consistently contradicts the established story, maybe it's the story that needs another look, not the evidence that needs to be ignored or dismissed, it calls for a bit of intellectual humility, maybe, and open-mindedness.
So our sources bring up this really profound idea, one that could completely flip our view of human history. What if history isn't this straight line, always progressing upwards from primitive cave dwellers to us with our smartphones constantly getting smarter and better?
The linear model of progress.
Right. What if instead history is cyclical?
The cyclical view, like seasons or ages rising and falling.
Exactly. It's not a new idea in philosophy, obviously, but when you apply it to these ancient mysteries, it changes everything. The hypothesis is basically this. What if humanity, way back, once had knowledge, had capabilities, maybe even technologies that were far, far beyond what we currently think was possible for those times?
Like a previous peak of civilization.
Yeah. And then something happened. Maybe a massive global cataclysm like floods or asteroid impacts. Maybe just societal collapse, wars, disease. Or maybe just a slow, gradual loss of knowledge over thousands of years. But somehow, that incredible understanding got lost. Wiped out, mostly.
Buried by time and disaster.
Exactly. And this cyclical theory, it offers this really powerful, kind of elegant way to understand how such advanced abilities could just seemingly pop up out of nowhere in the ancient past, flourish for a time, and then vanish for millennia, only to potentially reappear later in different forms.
It answers that persistent, how do they do it? Question in a different way. It suggests they weren't necessarily more primitive. Maybe they just knew more than we give them credit for knowledge that got lost in the cycle. It challenges that whole idea of constant upward progress as the only way humanity develops. Maybe it's more complex, more ebb and flow.
Maybe our current peak is just us rediscovering things that were known long, long ago.
That's the implication, yes.
And if we start thinking about history this way, cyclically, it totally reframes the purpose of these incredible alignments, doesn't it? Maybe they aren't just, architectural quirks, random buildings that, by some unbelievable fluke, happen to line up across the globe.
What's the alternative purpose, then?
The sources float this really compelling, almost chilling idea. What if the alignments could be messages?
Messages of the past.
Yeah, think about that. Not messages written on stone tablets that can crumble or scrolls that burn, but messages encoded in the hardest substance available, massive stones, and in the very geometry of the planet itself. Designed to survive catastrophes, designed to survive the erosion of time, designed to survive the rise and fall of countless empires.
So these monuments become time capsules, intentional communications across millennia.
That's the idea. It transforms them from just buildings into these monumental acts of communication aimed at the deep future. And if they are messages, what are they trying to tell us?
Warnings, perhaps.
Maybe. Warnings about cosmic cycles or geological disasters they knew were coming based on their long understanding of the planet and the heavens.
Or blueprints.
Or blueprints, like you said, maybe advanced schematics for technology we haven't rediscovered yet, for energy systems like the Earth grid idea, maybe even blueprints for how to organize society in a sustainable way. All just waiting there, silently, for a future civilization, maybe us, to finally get smart enough to figure them out.
The idea that ancient people might have had that kind of foresight, that deep concern for preserving crucial knowledge for future generations and transmitting it through these giant silent stone sentinels, that is possibly the most captivating and, provocative thought in this entire discussion.
It really is. It's a mind-bending thought, leaves you with way more questions than answers, which, hey, that's what a deep dive is all about, right?
Absolutely. Stewing the pot of accepted knowledge.
So, after digging into these mysterious global alignments, this astonishing precision that just seems to defy the standard story, challenging those mainstream views, and exploring these, let's face it, controversial hypotheses, lost civilizations, ETs, global energy grids, we have to turn it over to you, the listener. We have to pose the same question the sources basically force us to ask. What do you believe?
Are these really just random, incredibly unlikely coincidences that we're reading too much into?
Or is there something much deeper, much more deliberate going on in our ancient past, something we're only just beginning to maybe glimpse?
Because these aren't just, historical fun facts. They might actually be keys, enduring silent keys, potentially, to unlocking a much deeper understanding of our own shared history.
And maybe, just maybe, they offer some kind of vital blueprint for our future as well. The questions they raise, they're not just academic exercises. They really challenge us to look at ourselves, our history, our place in the universe with completely fresh eyes. And that brings us to the end of this particular deep dive, into the unexplained global alignments of ancient structures. So here's a final thought to chew on. If these ancient alignments are messages or blueprints left behind by some incredibly advanced but forgotten civilization, consider this. What specific knowledge do you think they were trying to pass on? What was so important that they went to such colossal effort to encode it in stone and planetary geometry?
And perhaps more importantly, why might that particular knowledge be incredibly relevant now in our own complex, rapidly changing world? Maybe more relevant than ever before.
What hidden wisdom might be just sitting there waiting for us to finally rediscover it? We really encourage you. Keep digging yourself. Continue your own deep dive. The information is out there.
Look into the Great Circle details yourself. Explore the specific astronomical alignments we touched on. Read about the different theories, lost civilizations, energy grids, all of it.
There's a whole universe of mystery waiting to be explored out there. Our past might be far richer, far stranger, and far more complex than we currently imagine. Thank you for joining us on the deep dive.
We'll catch you on the next one.